me share with you now a few things that I've learned, a few horticulture tips that I might leave you with, and this is sort of a recap of some of the things. I think I've told every one of you every one of these things, but we'll look at it. The soil is our building block, and we have tough soil here in Cabarrus County, poor soil. And that is, getting our soil right is going to be the basic on any kind of horticulture that we do. Of course, don't guess soil test. That's extension. We'll say don't guess soil test. That's job security, Robbie. The next guy that comes in or gal that comes in, she can say that her whole career. Don't guess soil test. Don't guess soil test. We add compost to it. Is one of the ways that we can benefit several of the things we need to manage on soil. And we just take those things we've been throwing away. Instead of throwing away, we pile them up, we let them rot, and use the compost. Compost is very valuable, finding more and more how valuable it is to have good compost, or cover crops if you're doing it on a larger scale. The other thing about compost is you can always compost your mistakes. So, that's actually not my wife's first husband there. Trees are one of the first things we look at when we come in and evaluate a landscape site. One of the most valuable things on our landscape, and one of the things I work with first, telling people never to top a tree. This is another thing that has been a perennial problem. Not as much a problem now as it has in years past. Seems like when I first got here it was worse than it is now, but never recommend topping a tree. I feel like that's a $2,000 or $3,000 worth of question every time I talk somebody out of topping a tree, because it adds that much value to their landscape. Trees don't love us back. We may love them, but they won't love us back. And so we need to remove, in an urban situation, we need to remove trees when they become dangerous, not when they become dead. And of course, if you think you need a ladder, you really need a professional. This is professional here. You wouldn't be able to stand up there if you was doing that yourself, right? The new construction, I learned this over time, is that I recommend, used to it sort of, you think, well, I want to save the trees, Actually, we don't. We don't want to save the trees up close to the house. We want to back all the trees off at least 30 foot from the house, clear it out to where you can get in there and do the construction without killing trees. From 30 to 60 foot, I say let's clean out all the old trees and just leave the young, healthy trees that are going to continue to grow up to 60 foot. Beyond 60 foot, if you have one of these old trees that you want to save, that's fine, but up close to the house, you're going to eventually, and sometimes sooner than later, have to take that tree out. So go ahead and get it out before the construction, which is a change from what some people think. Edible landscape is another thing I've worked with over the years, and this is sort of the summary of it. Our landscape should feed and shelter both wildlife and humans. It's a little bit different than just our landscapes need to be a pretty picture. So a little bit of different concept than what we've had in the past. And one thing I'd leave you with there, the top 3 edible shrubs for Cabarrus County, the rabbit-eye blueberry, the muscadine, and the fig, are ones that we all ought to be striving to get within our landscape some way or another. There's the muscadine and the fig. Mushrooms are a growing opportunity for urban landscapes. Show you a few here. The oyster mushroom is fairly ubiquitous here in the woods. I wildcraft them quite frequently, but it's one we can also grow. And of course, the shiitake mushroom is the one I've worked with the most. I think it's got the most market potential, actually. You go on the internet and it's antibacterial, antiviral, anti-tumor, immune booster, cholesterol reducer, blood pressure reducer, everything except what Viagra do, shiitake will do. This is another one here that I think has a potential for Cabarrus County, the lion's mane, and they are looking at that as a neurological benefit. So, Hen of the Woods is another one that grows here. Reishi, I think is the way you pronounce that one right there, more of a medicinal mushroom. Another mantra that we have is the right plant, right place. And you've heard me say that all the time, and putting the right plant in the right place is so valuable to our landscapes. Will save us so much money in the long term. The other rule of thumb that I sort of have is 90% common, 10% uncommon. The common plants are common for a reason. They're common because they're tough, they grow well, they work in our soils, they don't have a lot of insects and disease. That's why a lot of our plants are common plants. So let's use those plants. Let's go to the local nurseries and buy those plants. Within our landscape, though, I think everybody ought to have about 10% of the plants that are unusual. Of course, y'all plant geeks, y'all can go more than 10%, of course. But the average landscapes, you need to, let's take and put in about 10% of the plants that are a little bit unusual, a little bit unique, a little bit that I can talk about, my neighbors don't have, kind of thing, to get some diversity within our landscape. The common plants, there's about 40 plants. If you learn 40 plants, you can identify about 90% of the plants in the landscape, which is fine. And maybe that's the way it ought to be, that works. But we also need those unusual, those some that you bring into me like Nikki did a while ago and I couldn't identify it. So Terry, did you ever take a look at that plant? Maybe you can help her with that by the end of the class. All right, water management. We are due for another drought. Get a drought about it felt like we was going into it actually for the last few weeks. It's raining today, but we have a drought in this area about every 14 years on average. Occasionally we'll get an unusually dry summer in between those. And just a few points that I would make on water management. First of all plants need a little bit of water to get established. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's portulaca. We'll grow in a sand dune. You put it out there the first time, you may have to spit on it, is all you have to do, but you have to give it a little bit of water to get it established. And then most of your properly established plants don't need routine irrigation in our area here. On average, we get 36, 40 inches of rain per year. Generally is spread out fairly well, and our plants are adapted for that amount of rainwater or for less. And the last time we had a severe drought, basically the only plants that were really suffering, properly established landscape plants with plenty of room, the Alyssium, which it took the Alyssium out, and the Leylands. We found the Leylands were not as drought tolerant as we thought they were. But most of the plants we have around here, the hollies, they went through 12 weeks of no water, no problem whatsoever. Now, if you were trying to establish them, it'd be a different story. First year they need water. Once they're established, they didn't. I have a bit of a problem with that. So again, you need water to get them established. Once you get them established, you don't need water. And either way, municipal water shouldn't be used for routine irrigation, which it makes a lot of the people that install irrigation mad about that. But I think overall for society, when we're going through the trouble of treating this water, pumping this water, moving this water, it doesn't make sense to throw it back out on ornamental plants for routine irrigation. Moving to another one that may be even a little bit more controversial, in fact would break the law in some of the homeowner associations y'all live in. The idea of a grass monoculture lawn is thoughtless, and I put a lot of time and effort into coming up with the right word there, and that's the point that I want to make, that I think trying to have a grass monoculture is thoughtless. And the reason is because lawns offer an opportunity for us to grow pollen production for our pollinators, for beauty within the lawns, for medicinal plants and edible plants. And I'm going to give you one example right here. Recognize this plant, anybody?
Yeah.
Hensbit, yeah, hensbit. It's got a cousin called dead nettle. This one's the hensbit here, very similar plants. This plant comes up in the spring of the year, blooms like this, and very important for bees. I heard somebody say it out there, bees. The bees, honeybees will store up honey over the spring of the year actually, and then they sort of break even over the rest of the summer, and then fall and winter they use their stores to keep the hive alive over the winter. And so there's a point in the spring where they start gathering food again, and the first little things they gather, they still have to eat some of their stored food, but they get to a point where they can start gathering stuff from the wild to make it, to increase the colony. And of course they're trying to increase their numbers too, to take advantage of the tulip poplar that's coming on a little bit later. This is sort of the dividing line. When the bees can start working on this, and they've got a good amount of this to work on, they can make it. And what does the average person do out here? They get out there and they kill it. You know, and that's sort of the thoughtless point that I was getting. That's a beautiful plant to me. I leave it in my yard till that sort of blooms out, then I start mowing. There's other plants I have out there for beauty. There's other plants for pollen production. There's other plants for medicinal plants, which I normally go to the doctor when I need a medicinal thing, but I do have the plants out there in my lawn that could be used like that. Speaking of home remedies, a lot of horticulturalists seem to make a living out of knowing all these home remedies. I don't. What I would suggest doing is looking at home remedies, asked if it is economical, effective, and environmentally safe. You know, if it goes through those three gateways, then maybe it's worth remembering. Very few of them are. You know, I've seen some that the home remedy costs more than going buying Roundup to do the job right to begin with, for example. Some of them don't work that well. When you get into some of your perennial plants, weed killers or insects and things like that, they're not effective. So it doesn't matter how cheap they are, you're not getting the job done. And then environmentally safe, if they went through the testing to be environmentally safe. Would say it's always a good idea to try to work with nature instead of against nature. Nature was here first. Nature was not here, you know, waiting for 10,000 years for you to get that property so you could sort of help her out. That's not what she was about. I'll leave you with this one thing right here. This is actually a song, a Southern gospel song called A Beautiful Life by William Golden. If you search for that on YouTube, you can find it, Beautiful Life. And one of the verses right here, it's sort of the whole song speaks to me, but in particular one of the verses I think works for horticulture people here. And I'm not going to sing it for you, but I will read it to you. If I get to the right point here, looking for there we go. While going down life's weary road, I'll try to lift some traveler's load. I'll try to turn the night to day, make flowers bloom along the way. So that's what I'm saying. Plants are not as important as people. People are more important than plants. And you hear me say a lot of times, plan and plant for a better world. That's not original to me. I'm quoting J.C. Ralston, but J.C. Ralston was the same way. You know, the people are more important than plants long term, but we need to, as horticulturalists, as gardeners, plan and plant for a better world. Thank you.